Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Music, Money, and Life podcast. This podcast is brought to you by howtolicenseyourmusic.com. If you are a singer, songwriter, if you play in a band, if you are a musician of any sort and you write music that you are interested in licensing into TV, films, video games, and so on, check out my website, howtolicenseyourmusic.com. Today, I have a special guest with me. I have a Canadian-based musician, Aaron Solomon. And Aaron is a fellow Berklee alum, and Aaron and I created a course together last year specifically about how to make money with stock music libraries. Aaron licenses a lot of his music into production libraries and stock music libraries. And we did a whole course together specifically about that. And we'll talk a little more about that course throughout this podcast. But today, Aaron and I are going to talk about stock music and the music business in general and what Aaron has been up to. Aaron, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to have you on the podcast, Aaron.
Happy to be here.
So, by the way, what part of Canada are you from? I always say Canadian-based, like it's just one place. Where are you in Canada?
Right now, I'm in Montreal. I grew up in Ottawa, which is about 2 hours away, but based in Montreal now.
Nice. And how long have you been living in Montreal?
Since 2006.
Okay. And good music scene in Montreal, right?
Yeah, great music scene in Montreal. Lots of amazing musicians here. It's kind of like it's turned into this weird city that like so many artists of all types come to live here just because the rent's a little cheaper than most other major cities. So you get this great art scene and people are kind of able to dedicate a little more time to their art than you could in New York where you have to make so much just to make your rent and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm from Chicago, and it's a relatively affordable city for being such a large city. But I'm always amazed at like just how much apartments are renting for in New York.
Yeah,
I don't see how people do it, but I guess a lot of jobs pay more as well. So hopefully it sort of balances out. So Aaron, you do a lot of licensing and production music and engineering. Do you perform as well?
I do, although not as much recently. Montreal is kind of, I guess, sort of because the music scene's gotten so popular here, it's turned into maybe like half the venues are pay to play, and the other half are not. They're not pay to play, but it's pretty rare to just find someone who will even throw $100 your way for the effort. So for me, I'm like I love performing, but most of the performing I've done recently has been as a backup player for other artists, just because I can't convince myself to go out and do a whole night's work for nothing.
Yeah, it's really hard to make money with original music unless you're really established. Yeah,
I certainly had like a performing career going in Ottawa when I lived there, but that was at like the end of the 90s, which was sort of the last vestige of paying gigs, it seemed.
Yeah, it's. I think it's hard everywhere. I mean, it's the same in Chicago. You pretty much, to a certain extent, you pretty much get paid based on how many people you bring out, which is fair, I guess. Obviously bar owners need to make money, but, there's just so many original acts that it's really hard to kind of break through unless you're really, really established.
For sure. Which
is why having the licensing as a revenue stream is nice. Now, when we did the course together last year on stock music, you had sounded like carved out a pretty nice niche for yourself doing background music and production music. And, it's been a while. Remind me of some of the shows. I know you've had music all over the place. What are some of the TV shows you've had your music on, Aaron?
Sure. The list is, it must have grown to maybe 100 shows by now, so I don't know them all off the top of my head. But the big ones that always seem to kind of pay out nicely on the royalty statements are these like reality shows like Teen Mom. I actually just got a preview of my next royalty statement on May 1st. Yeah. So I was looking at the breakdown of that, and it's all these like Teen Mom, Baby's First Day, Teen Cribs, all these shows like that, which I don't even really know. I haven't seen them, so I can't really comment on what they're like. There's shows I have seen, like American Pickers has been one of my best continuous, like kind of constant payouts. They picked like 3 or 4 of my cues that they just use over and over and over for scene transitions and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always good, and they use them every episode, it seems.
Nice.
So that's been a big one. And then a lot of the American Pickers spin-offs have picked up my music as well. So there's all these like, American Restoration, American this, American that, and all those shows have picked it up. What else? Pawn Stars, Auction Kings. A Canadian library got me a placement in this show called Departures, which then got picked up by National Geographic. So it's playing in the UK and it's also playing in the US now. So that's starting to pay out a bit. So yeah, that's just a small sampling.
Nice. And who did you get the Departures placement through?
The Departures placement was through a library called Soundscape Media. I hope I have this right.
Yeah. I know those guys. Sure.
It's a guy named Jason who works out of Toronto, and
Jason Greenberg. Yeah, I interviewed
that's
him last year as well. Did you find out about him through me? I'm just curious. Or did you already know about him?
That is a good question. I think I found out about him several years ago, so I'm not 100% sure. But I'm pretty sure that when he was starting to like build his library, that a call went out through maybe Sonic Bids.
Okay.
And that was maybe how I found it, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay.
But we actually got together in Toronto last summer and went and had a beer. So that was good to actually meet up with some of these people, because usually it's all over the computer and you never meet anyone,
Yeah, no, I agree. I work with a few people, from Canada that are based out of Canada. I'd love to at some point make a trip up there and meet you and meet Jason and meet a few other people that I've been working with. So I'll have to plan that at some point.
Cool.
So, well, listen, so you do a lot of licensing. You've had music on over 100 shows and have things. When we talked last year, you sounded like you had reached a point where you were making a really nice part-time income from licensing, and have things picked up for you this year? Are you seeing things grow?
It picked up slightly, to the point where I think when we talked last time, I was saying that, my royalties were sometimes 1,000, sometimes 2,000 every quarter. And then I would make up the rest through, initial sales off the stock sites, because you get a tiny bit of money from that, $20 here and there kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the rest of my income was coming through engineering for other artists, consulting, playing live for other artists. And then I had a couple of video game music contracts as well, which I haven't done since we last talked. But yeah, the royalties have steadily increased slowly to the point where it's almost $1,000 a month just in royalties now.
Mm-hmm.
So the initial sales now are just kind of a nice bonus on top of that. So my strategy now is to try to take the summer, because I've just finished mixing an album for somebody. So now I kind of left the licensing thing aside for a bit while I was heavily focused on that album.
Mm-hmm.
So now my strategy that I'm done with that album is to spend the summer just doing instrumental tracks and getting, maybe doubling the amount of tracks I have in these libraries, and hopefully doubling the income accordingly.
Nice. And how old are you, if you don't mind me asking, Aaron?
31.
31, okay. And do you feel like you're building a pretty sustainable career for yourself at this point? I mean, it sounds to me like things are growing steadily. I know it's taken you a few years to build up this revenue stream. I know a lot of musicians, and I know it can be sort of an unstable career at times. How do you feel personally about sort of where you're headed?
Well, I mean, the nice optimistic answer is, sure, it certainly could be sustainable if it sort of continues on the path it's been going. The honest answer is, I mean, you really have no idea with the freelance music career. I think, like, if we could get it, if I could get it sort of to a point where the royalties were maybe $5,000 a quarter, that's a basic kind of entry level income right there.
Sure.
And then anything I do on top of that, contracts or whatever, would, just be bonus income. And that would be, not a wonderful standard of living, but a basic kind of, entry level job, which many people would be very happy to have, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of my short-term goal is to get it to that point in the next couple of years. Now, after that, if I want to go beyond, you know, making maybe $30,000 a year or something, then yeah, I will have to think about other strategies to do that, whether it's just doing so many songs so quickly that I have, you know, 1,000 songs in stock libraries, and I see a lot of people do that. I'm not really sure how they do it, but they do it.
Yeah.
And so that would be one way to go, because at a certain point, if you have so many songs in these stock libraries, like just your initial sales every month would sort of pay for your life, and then your royalties would eventually be very large. Finding the time to write 1,000 pieces, I don't know. So that would be one way to go. The other way to go would be starting my own library and, you know, working with some of the composers and friends that I've met over the last few years. That would be less work on the composing end on my part, but more work on the relationship building end. So those are a couple thoughts.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. I do know a lot of seems like a lot of publishers start out licensing their own music, and then they realize, well, it's pretty hard. Not that you can't do it. I know quite a few people who make a full-time living licensing music, but you have to crank out a lot of music generally to make that happen.
Yeah, and I mean the thing that I think is kind of my strength or my sort of niche in stock music, it also sort of limits how much I can do, because I think my strength is that I treat my recordings sort of the way that you would treat like an album recording or something. Like I do a lot of old-fashioned sort of live instrument tracking and mixing. Might take, you know, several hours at least, and I master them like an actual mastering engineer would master them, you know, so I'm not using plug-in presets. I'm not burning out a track in half an hour or an hour. So that's, I think that's a strength, because a lot of the libraries say like, oh, why do your tracks sound so good? Or, you know, this is a great level of even just recording and mix quality. But on the other hand, that means I can't, you know, to do 1,000 of those would take a few years at least.
Yeah, it's time consuming.
Yeah.
So how much would you say, Aaron, that you make altogether through engineering and licensing?
I would say right now it's in the low 20,000 range. So it's not a fairy tale sort of, you know, story of riches through music licensing. At this point it's kind of a entry level sort of income.
Is that enough to live in a city like Montreal?
It is. That's the thing about Montreal, is that almost everyone here is in that kind of income range, and some people are even below it, just because rent is so cheap. So we're lucky that we ended up here in that sense. On the other hand, you know, the rent and stuff here is like that because it's so tough to find a traditional job here. So it's not like I could give up on the music licensing and go get an office job or something. Those things sort of exist less than in other cities. But yeah, it is possible to live on quite a low income in Montreal.
What does like a decent 1-bedroom apartment go for in Montreal?
You can get a totally livable 1-bedroom for $500 a month or less.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
If you want to, it's very rare for someone to break the $1,000 a month barrier for rent here. If they do, it's pretty luxurious.
Yeah. You know, obviously anyone who's drawn to the music business and making money through music, I mean, I think it's pretty common knowledge that it's not an easy business to break into. And there's a reason the whole struggling artist stereotype exists. But I think it's also worth asking the question, you know, would you rather, you're making low, you know, $20,000 or to $25,000 a year, whatever you make, but you're doing something you love. So it's a question of, would you rather go into a field that you're passionate about and you're really interested in and maybe not make a lot of money right away? Or would you rather do something that you hate doing and make $50,000 or $70,000 a year? What are your thoughts on that, Aaron? I mean, obviously you've chosen this field because you love it. Do you feel like it's a good trade-off?
I think at this point it's an okay trade-off. I mean, I don't want to totally say that those are, you know, the only two ends of a possible dichotomy is to love what you do and be poor, or hate what you do and be rich.
No, absolutely. And I'm not suggesting those are the only two options either. But at least in the beginning, I think that for most musicians, there is a period where you do struggle a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I would say, like, certainly I would rather be working in music. There are other things I'm interested in that I could probably make more money at. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to, I have friends who have worked in call centers, is like the big industry here. If you can't find a job, you go get a job in a call center. And I managed to avoid that. But I have so many friends who have done it, and they can make, more money than I'm making on music just working in a call center. But no one seems to really find that any kind of fulfilling career. So yeah, I mean, if it was something like if I took a university teaching gig or something, I would love that. I love teaching. Yeah. So that could be something that would be more lucrative, but also kind of related. But I wouldn't stop, doing music licensing or playing or anything if I did take a teaching gig. So that's kind of one thing that's in the back of my mind is, maybe aim for a university position at some point.
Teaching what? What would you teach?
I would either teach production engineering courses would probably be my first choice. Music business courses would be another option. But yeah, things like that. But barring that, I mean, I do think at this point I'm on a path where the licensing thing is going to grow as long as I can find the time to write more music is the only thing. So we'll see kind of where that tops out. And if I feel like I've got 500 tracks in libraries and I've reached a kind of tipping point where it's not going to grow anymore, then maybe I'll think about, moving into something more lucrative. But yeah, at this point, it's a good trade-off.
Well, and the nice thing about the licensing income too is that a lot of it, like once the songs are created and written and produced, the income is basically passive, right? You have this music out there that you'll continue to earn income from. That's it.
It'll pay you for hopefully the rest of your life. I mean, we went out with some friends yesterday, and we were in the car, and I said, "Oh, I just got my SOCAN statement, and Teen Mom alone, a single placement was a few $100s this time." And they're like, "Oh, that's amazing. How does that work?"
I just had a conversation with a musician named Chuck Hughes, who I'm actually going to bring on the podcast next week. I'm going to interview him, and his last royalty check was for like $9,000, just for the first quarter alone. So, but he's been at it for like 10 years, so it does take time, and it's a challenge, when I do these courses where I help people get started in the licensing business, and it seems like people are sort of looking for some sort of a shortcut, and you have to network and get your music connected to the right people, and you have to do it on a really regular basis.
That's actually a great segue into something that I wanted to talk about on the podcast. Is that, like, that's kind of my aim, is to get to where this guy Chuck you were talking about is, where your royalty payouts are like that. And I do think that's doable. Obviously, it was doable for him. But so like, and he's been at it for 10 years. I've been at this, well, I kind of fumbled around for a year or two at the start, and then I've been seriously at it for maybe 4 years after that. So give it another 5 years, I think I could get to that point. But the thing I wanted to say was exactly what you said, that I've been talking to a lot of artists too. Like, we did that thing with the course where you got a free Skype consultation. So I was talking to people through that, and then I've been doing some consulting work for artists who want to get started in licensing, and they just don't have the patience or the technical know-how to go through FTP uploads, and every site's different requirements. So I've been doing a bit of that for people, and I do find that, like, there's some people who and they're usually like the older people who have kind of had time to get through life and see things. Like, there's one guy who's in his 70s, and he's like, I'm just going to put all my music into these libraries, give it a year or two, and it's starting to pay off for him. But then there's other people who are usually, in kind of our age group, in their from 20s to 30s or late 30s or whatever. And they're more like, okay, you know, I've been at this for 6 months and I've got, some of them have kids to support, and, you know, like, when is this going to start doing something for me?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I mean, you put 20 songs in one library, like, it's not. And sometimes even these people, with putting 20 songs in one library, they'll get a license that pays out $100 or $200. I think that's amazing, but it's not, you know, that's all it's going to be if you have 20 songs in one library.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there are certain licensing spots that pay very handsomely, but most don't. And especially if you're doing production music and background music, those placements don't tend to pay as well. But there are, I mean, I've got a friend who plays music and tours who just got a $7,500 placement on I forget, it's a primetime network show. So there are placements that pay very well. But typically you have to have a large catalog that's licensed, you know, consistently. But no, I was just going to say, Chuck, the guy who I'm bringing on, who is up to like $9,000 or $10,000 a quarter, it's funny, I've worked with him for a couple of years now, and he's taken a couple of my courses, and I've helped him get a few of his placements, and he does this instrumental, just like rock and guitar stuff. And I was talking to him on the phone today, and I'm like, Chuck, just out of curiosity, how old are you? And he's like, I'm 60, you know, 62
Wow.
years old. And, but he's doing great. I mean, he's doing his thing. He performs, he licenses music. I think he does a few other things as well. So I think the point is it's possible, you know, music is viable. And I know a lot of people who make a full-time income doing it, but it takes time and a lot of determination, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my statements have been consistently about 2,500 the last few quarters. So that's an improvement even for me over where we were when we did the course.
Yeah.
But you know, it's enough that I can see the potential to kind of get to where Chuck is with, you know, five more years of putting stuff into these libraries. But yeah, that's amazing that he's doing that.
Yeah. So how much engineering are you doing these days?
Well, a lot up until about last week. So
yeah.
I was, a guy who I actually used to teach guitar to when he was a teenager in Ottawa. About, maybe 10 years or more has passed since then. And he's now a singer-songwriter in Ottawa. So when I was producing and mixing the last album before that I did for this girl named Eleanor Altman, I did a lot of the work from Ottawa, and he would drop by from time to time, and he actually lent me a guitar amp for the album. So he would drop by and hear the mixes. And then, we got to talking, and he was like, well, I have been really wanting to do, an album, a really serious album. So yeah, a couple months after that, he was like, yeah, let's do it. So I started out producing the album and tracking it. There wasn't quite the budget there for me to be full-time producer traveling to Ottawa all the time. So I did like kind of heavy production work on the first maybe 3 or 4 songs. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of just gave him some written guidelines, like, you might want to put a shaker on your chorus, like things like that. And maybe some background vocals here, without actually being physically present and constructing the arrangements for him. And he kind of took over for the rest of the album. And he got string players that were just friends of his. So he got a sort of fake string section because he just overdubbed them over themselves. So we did all that. And then I mixed the record and just finished that up about 2 weeks ago. And then to celebrate, I went to New Orleans for a couple weeks.
Yeah. So how was your trip to New Orleans? You said that it was a very strange city. What did you mean by that? I haven't been to New Orleans in probably a decade at least. I mean, I know it's a crazy place, but what was your trip like?
It's a weird place. Yeah, I had never been. I had never really been to much of what you would call the South in the U.S. except for Florida and a brief stop in Virginia, but very brief. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to get like too political on a music podcast.
No, don't be afraid, man. Just let it out. Tell us what you're feeling.
No, it's.
I want these podcasts to be as open as possible.
All right, cool. Yeah, it was like, on the one hand, it's amazing. Like it's a super cool city, and it's one of the last places that you feel has a really sort of different culture in the U.S. There's a weird mix of like French influence and African American influence and Acadian influence, who are people who actually came down from Nova Scotia in Canada and established residence there. So there's this really weird mix, which results in amazing food and a really strange accent and kind of a joie de vivre, as we say here, that you maybe don't find in other cities in the U.S. So that was the great part of it. The weird part is that like the level of racism and the sort of class disparity there is so pronounced, in this day and age. And you just, you're talking to sort of people you meet and they say these just horribly racist things
Can you give us an example?
Stuff I probably wouldn't even want to say like on the podcast. And you're like, why do you think that, because we're like white people visiting, that you can talk about this with us? Like, this is not how we feel. We're not from your culture,
That surprises me, and it doesn't. I sort of grew up in the South. From the age of 10 to about 15, I lived in Florida and Alabama. And to give you an example, the school I went to my freshman year in high school was an all-white private school in Mississippi. So I lived about, like 15 minutes from the border of Alabama and Mississippi. So my parents wanted to put me in a good school, so they found this all-white private school. And my freshman class, there were about 15 people. So it was a super small school. But this school was so blatantly racist. They did this thing that, and people don't even believe me when I tell this story, but every year they would do this thing called Slave Day, where they would do like this fake auction and paint. I mean, I'm almost like, I can't even tell this story. It's so sickening.
How could that even, what year was this?
So I'm 39. This would have been, I graduated in 92. So this would have been like 90 or no, this would have been 88, my freshman year. So, I'd like to think that things have improved a little bit since then, but, you never know when it comes to the South, right?
Yeah, it was really good. It's good perspective because, like, I think like Canada has a whole different sort of racism and relationship with race relations. They're I guess more polite about it, but still, there's a lot of problems
and look,
there.
Just before we move on, I've got to tell everybody I didn't participate in the Slave Day. Like I would sit on the bleachers and I'm like, I'm not doing this. Like this is freaking crazy. So anyways, I had to say that. And then my sophomore year in high school, I moved to Chicago and I went to this very diverse, it was called the Chicago School of the Arts. It was sort of like a FAME. It was based on the original FAME school in New York. So I would take like music classes in the morning. Or no, I think it was the other way around. In the morning, I would take all the regular, like traditional academic classes, and then I'd go to lunch and come back, and it was all music, and it was awesome. And there were, all races and a very open liberal school. So very sort of the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's great. And it's, I'm glad even though it was so kind of weird to hear people saying those things, I'm glad we went because I think the problem that we can sometimes have in these sort of liberal bastions, and especially in Canada, when we were growing up in the 90s and stuff, we were kind of told that there was no more racism, and you don't really know any better when you're a little kid. So I think it's important to visit places and have these kind of interactions, because it can be tempting to think that we don't need to do anything about these problems anymore because they've been solved, and you realize at some point, we're not as far as I thought.
Yeah. Well, I feel like most of America has sort of moved on. I feel like there are obviously still pockets of, there are places where I'm sure it's alive and well, but I don't, other than a few places in the South, like I've never sensed that in Chicago, but I guess that's a whole different part of the world.
Yeah, and it's
a different part of the country.
And it's tough for us to say, right?
Well, that's true. Yeah, I mean, obviously, my perspective as a white male is probably different than an African American. But anyway, so you had a good trip?
Yeah, it was amazing. I saw some great music. stumbled into actually a little like Japanese pub, which was the last place I expected to see like great jazz, but there was this great like jazz duo playing there. It was really fun.
Nice. So now you're back in Montreal, and what are you working on these days?
So it's looking like, I'm not 100% sure on who's going to be doing the mastering on the album that I just did. It may end up being me, but that remains to be seen. So there may be that. And then after that, I'm going to dive headfirst into doing more instrumentals. So I've kind of saved up enough that I can cover my expenses for hopefully a few months of just focusing on composition and uploading to libraries. And that's my plan for the moment. I think I'm going to maybe start doing a little more live work with Eleanor Altman again. She's thinking of starting up playing a bit.
Nice.
And those are the plans for the moment.
Excellent. Well, listen, let's, like I said before we started the podcast, let's do another promo on our course, the How to Make Money with Stock Music Libraries. Of all the courses I've done so far, I'm pretty sure this is the best-selling course that I've done yet. It seems like there's a lot of interest in this topic. So
great. Can I give one little tidbit that I meant to include here that's kind of like a bonus piece of info that wasn't as applicable when we did the course?
Yeah, for sure.
So if someone has listened through this whole thing, they get this bonus. When we were doing the course, one of the things in the course is we were talking about like tricks to make it like you have more tracks than you actually do, because that's a huge thing for sales. And one of the things we had talked about was making certain edited versions, and we talked about what lengths of edits networks usually need. So a trend I've noticed since we did that is about 6 months after we did the course, maybe some of the biggest libraries that supplied all these network reality shows and stuff, they started sending out really specific directions for what they needed. And one of the big things that at least 2 or 3 libraries said was they want mixed stems now, which no one had really been saying before. So for people who don't know what mixed stems are, it's just when you're printing your mixes, you would do a full mix of your instrumental. Then you would usually do something without like the lead instrument if there's a melody. And then they also want like just the drums. Then they want something that's like drums and bass alone together. Then they want the rest of the track without the drums underneath it. So it's like weird things like this. And I guess I can't say exactly why they're asking for these things. Maybe it's if they don't like the mix, they can change levels of groups a little bit. Maybe it's so they can, if they need to run the track under a 5-minute segment and the track's only a minute long, they can cut out to just the drums and then bring the track back in, make it sound more varied. But for some reason, all these libraries are asking for mixed stems now. So that's a good thing. So as well as printing your edits or doing your edits, print mixed stems and upload your mixed stems for sale as well. And
okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I did a course a few months ago with the music coordinator from CBS Sports, Joseph Miller. And I remember he mentioned this same thing as well, which is sort of news to me. I'm surprised that they have that much time to edit things to that extent.
Yeah, it's weird.
But yeah, he was saying the exact same thing. So that's a good tip. So yeah, anyways, let's do another promo. It's been quite a while since I've really offered a discount on our course. Let's do it for, I think the regular price is $49.97. So we'll offer it for $39.97 if people buy it. I think I'll set it up for, let's run it for like a week, because depending on when this podcast is posted on my site, I want to give people enough time to go check it out. So again, the course is How to Make Money with Stock Music Libraries. And it's I think it's like almost 2 hours. It's a pretty long course. And Aaron and I go into depth. We go into a lot of detail specifically on how to make money with stock music libraries, where to send your music, how to edit your music, how you get paid, and a whole lot more. So my site is howtolicenseyourmusic.com. If you go to howtolicenseyourmusic.com/stock music, you can learn more about the course that Aaron and I created. Aaron, anything else to add?
Sure. I'll say that maybe the most valuable thing in the whole course is just a little list at the bottom of, I think it's the 6 libraries that I probably make at least 75 or 80% of my sales and royalties from. So there's not a lot of big secrets. There's just, a list of where most of my placements come from. So that's a huge bit of info there that can keep you occupied for a year or two uploading music with just that list.
Okay, yeah, excellent. So we have the list of those libraries, and I think what I'll also do, this is just sort of off the top of my head, but I'll also throw in my directory. So it's the 2013 TV and film music licensing directory. I think the most important thing if you're trying to get into licensing is just to submit your music to a lot of different places, at least in the beginning, until you start to kind of figure out who you're going to be a good fit for. So if you purchase that between now and, let's say, May 12th, because I don't know, it'll take a couple days for this to show up on iTunes. So between now and May 12th, go to howtolicenseyourmusic.com/stock music, all one word, and learn more about the course Aaron and I created. And by the way, if for people who have been listening to this podcast, most of these episodes, I don't really do big sales pitches, but I thought with you, Aaron, since we did this course together, it would be sort of logical to plug our course again.
Cool. Sounds good.
And Aaron, what I like to do, it's sort of becoming a tradition at the end of each podcast. I like to play a song from, whoever I have on the podcast. So do you have anything new that you've been working on we can play?
New, let's see. I did a licensing call a few weeks ago for a library where they just wanted some kind of funny hip hop. I don't know if that's the best example of what I do. But yeah, you want me to just send you something after we do this?
Yeah, send me a track, but if you could tell me the name of it now, I can set it up properly.
Okay, cool. Let's say I'll send you a track called Sunset in 6, which you may have heard before, but it's a nice kind of overall representative thing of my philosophy of how to do good stock music.
Sunset in 6, and is this something you've had on different shows?
Yes, it's been picked up a fair bit, and it's probably one of my favorites. It's a nice acoustic guitar kind of lonely sounding piece with some slide guitar over it.
And what shows has it been played on?
I'm pretty sure it has been on one of those, Teen Mom, sometimes they do sad sort of montages for the Teen Mom thing. I'm pretty sure it got picked up for one of those. Okay,
fair enough. Sunset in 6 by Aaron Solomon. And where can people learn more about you, Aaron? What's your website?
So I have my main website, which is aaronmusic.com, which has been a bit neglected since my performing sort of went on the back burner. And then all my instrumentals are up on a site at reverbnation.com/TV music.
reverbnation.com/TV music.
Yep.
Awesome, Aaron. Thank you so much for doing this with me today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Cool. You too.
All right.